I sometimes wonder how things would have unfolded if my father hadn't passed away that spring morning. I was only 6, but the memory is as vivid as yesterday. Dad was making pancakes, his Sunday specialty, shaping them into funny faces that always cracked me up. Mom was setting the table, humming a tune I can no longer recall. "Lily, princess, come help your old man flip these masterpieces," Dad called out, wielding his spatula like a magic wand. I leapt from the couch, leaving my beloved stuffed bunny behind, and raced to the kitchen. That's when it happened. The spatula clattered to the floor and Dad clutched his chest, his face contorted in agony. Everything after that is a blur. Ambulance sirens, hospital corridors, and Mom's heartbreaking sobs. Just like that, my father was gone, leaving behind a house that felt too large, too silent. Mom didn't grieve for long. She met Richard at a support group for widowed parents. He seemed nice, tall, with kind eyes and a gentle smile that faintly reminded me of Dad. Within a year, they were married, and he moved in. I was still adjusting to a new father figure when Mom dropped another bombshell. She was pregnant. Her face radiated excitement as she announced I was going to be a big sister. Tommy was born when I was 8, and that's when everything shifted. That's when Mom quit her teaching job. "Tommy needs me," she'd say whenever anyone questioned her decision. "These early years are crucial for a child's development," she'd add. I wanted to ask about my early years, whether they hadn't been crucial too, but the words caught in my throat. I watched Mom's world shrink until it revolved solely around Tommy. She'd forget my lunch, then feign surprise at my hunger at dinner. "Oh, I'm sorry, sweetie," she'd say distractedly, already turning back to Tommy. I was so busy with Tommy's doctor's appointment today. It wasn't an isolated incident. It became the norm. Richard noticed. I'd catch him watching Mom with a worried frown as she fussed over Tommy, completely ignoring me. One evening, as I sat alone with my homework, he sat beside me. "You know, Lily," he said quietly, helping me with my math, "sometimes people get so caught up in one thing they forget to see what else they might be missing." As Tommy grew, the tension in our house became unbearable. Richard tried talking to Mom countless times about her obsession with Tommy, but it always ended the same way, Mom becoming defensive and angry. I remember one dinner where Richard brought it up. Tommy, about 5, was pushing his food around his plate while Mom hovered, trying to coax him to eat. "Sarah," Richard said, putting down his fork, "we need to talk. You can't keep hovering like this. He needs to learn independence." Mom's face hardened. "What are you saying? That I'm a bad mother?" "That's not what I meant, and you know it," Richard replied calmly. "But you've got 2 kids here, not 1, and a husband, by the way." I pretended to be engrossed in my mashed potatoes, but I hung on every word. "Tommy needs me," Mom snapped. "He's still so young. I was young too," I mumbled, unheard. The situation reached a breaking point when Richard suggested Little League for Tommy. I was on the stairs, supposedly doing homework, when I overheard their kitchen argument. "Absolutely not." Mom's voice was shrill. "Do you know how dangerous baseball is? He could get hit, twist his ankle." "Sarah," Richard countered, "he needs to experience life. You can't protect him from everything." But Mom wouldn't budge. Instead, she enrolled Tommy in art classes. I remember Tommy's sullen face as he listlessly dragged his brush across the paper while other kids actually tried to learn. He quit after 3 sessions, and Mom blamed the teacher for not understanding her son's creative spirit. Meanwhile, Richard started spending more time with me. Perhaps it was his way of balancing Mom's behavior, or maybe he simply saw a child who needed support. He took me to karate 3 times a week, sitting through every session, cheering louder than any other parent when I earned my belts. But while I thrived under Richard's attention, Tommy became increasingly difficult. His room was a disaster, and Mom would turn to me with that dreaded look. "Lily, be a dear and clean Tommy's room." She didn't ask, she told. One day, Richard found out about this arrangement. "She's not his maid, Sarah," he protested. He needs to learn to clean up after himself. That's when Mom burst into tears, unleashing her ultimate weapon. I knew it. You love her more than your own son. How can you treat Tommy this way? I watched Richard's face fall, the fight draining from his eyes. He looked at me apologetically, then raised his hands in surrender. Fine, he said quietly, walking away. After that, he stopped arguing with Mom about Tommy, but the look he gave me spoke volumes. He hadn't given up on me, even if he had on them. My strained relationship with Mom offered little solace, but sometimes small comforts are all we have. High school graduation was bittersweet. In my cap and gown, I spotted Richard beaming with pride. Mom was there too, but glued to her phone, likely texting Tommy's babysitter. That evening, Richard called me to his study. I've been saving, he said, producing a folder overflowing with college brochures. You can go anywhere you want, Lily. The sky's the limit. Before I could respond, Mom barged in. You can't be serious, she exclaimed. That money should be saved for Tommy's future. He'll need it more. Richard's face hardened, a familiar expression during these clashes. This is non-negotiable, Sarah. I've already made my decision. I chose Marshall University in West Virginia. Far enough for a fresh start, but close enough for occasional visits. College was exactly what I needed. For the first time, I felt free from the shadow of being the less favored child. I called home weekly, but mostly spoke with Richard. Mom was always too busy with Tommy. Your brother's going through a rough patch, Richard explained one call, his voice weary. He's hanging out with the wrong crowd. I tried getting him involved in after-school programs, but your mother— Let me guess, I interrupted. She said you were being too hard on him? Exactly, he sighed. Called me a tyrant for suggesting he needed structure. My visits home lessened as Tommy's behavior worsened. When I did go, he barely acknowledged me, holed up in his room with video games. The few times I glimpsed him, he looked pale and angry, eyes glued to screens. After graduation, I landed a job at Deloitte's consulting division. I stayed in West Virginia, building my career while watching my brother's self-imposed isolation from afar. During a rare visit, I tried to reach out. Tommy, want to grab lunch? My treat. The only response was the sound of gunfire from his game. Mom, passing in the hallway, shrugged. He's not feeling social today. Very stressed, you know. The contrast between our lives couldn't have been starker. I pursued my goals, while Tommy chased virtual achievements, fueled by Mom's endless excuses. Richard's disappointed face said it all, but even he had largely given up trying to intervene. By 27, I'd saved enough for a down payment on my own place, a one-bedroom apartment, but it was mine. The day I got the keys, I couldn't stop smiling. Years of saving, brown bag lunches, and foregoing designer clothes had finally paid off. You all have to see it, I announced during my weekly call. Housewarming party next Saturday. I'll cook dinner. Richard, I'm even making your favorite lasagna. Wouldn't miss it for the world, kiddo, Richard replied warmly. Mom's voice cut in. Oh, honey, I don't think we can make it. Tommy has plans that day. What kind of plans? I asked, skepticism evident. Very important ones, Mom vaguely replied, the sound of Tommy's video game blasting in the background. Only Richard came to the housewarming. He brought a potted plant and wine. Your mother sends her love, he said, though we both knew it was a lie. Over dinner, Richard explained the situation at home. Tommy, now 20, hadn't gone to college and spent his days gaming or with his drinking buddies. Richard had tried to help, offering him a position at his construction company. Everyone needs to start somewhere, Richard explained, twirling pasta. But Sarah? He shook his head. Sarah said it would be beneath him. Can you believe that? Tommy was too intelligent for manual labor, I muttered. Too intelligent to work, but not too intelligent to mooch off his parents. Richard gave me a sad smile. I keep trying, Lily. God knows I keep trying. That was our last real conversation. 2 years later, the call came that changed everything. Richard had collapsed at work, a massive heart attack, just like my father. By the time I reached the hospital, he was gone. The funeral was surreal. Mom put on a dramatic display, sobbing and telling everyone what a wonderful husband Richard had been. "We were so happy," she wailed. "How will we manage without him?" I watched her performance with disgust and pity. Her tears weren't for Richard. They were for herself. I saw the calculation behind her grief-stricken facade. Richard had been the sole provider. Without his income, how would she maintain Tommy's lifestyle? Tommy didn't even bother with a proper suit. He showed up at Richard's funeral in rumpled khakis and a worn polo shirt. He spent most of the service staring at his phone while Mom made excuses for his behavior. "He's processing his grief in his own way," she claimed. Standing there at Richard's grave, I couldn't help but notice the grim repetition of history. Another father figure, another heart attack, another funeral. Only this time, I was old enough to see clearly. Mom's tears were more about her finances than her broken heart. A year after Richard's death, I'd largely lost contact with Mom and Tommy. What little I knew came from Aunt Linda's sporadic calls. "They're getting by on Richard's savings," she'd said. "Your mom sold his Chevy last month. The tools from his workshop went before that." I tried not to care. I really did. But when Mom's number flashed on my phone one Tuesday evening, my heart still skipped a beat. "Lily," her voice was thinner than I remembered, "I need you to come home. Please." Something in her tone made me book a flight for the next day. Pulling up to the old house, I barely recognized it. The once pristine lawn, meticulously maintained by Richard, was choked with weeds. Paint peeled from the window frames. A shutter hung askew. The house wasn't the only thing that had deteriorated. Mom opened the door, and I had to stifle a gasp. The vibrant woman I remembered had been replaced by someone who looked 20 years older. Deep wrinkles etched her face. Her perfectly styled hair revealed stark gray roots. "Come in," she said, leading me into the living room. The house smelled musty. Dirty dishes piled in the sink. A fine layer of dust coated everything. This was the woman who used to make me rewash plates for even a tiny water spot. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, sinking onto the couch. A spring jabbed into my thigh, another thing Richard would have fixed instantly. She broke down immediately. "We're running out of money, Lily. My pension barely covers utilities, and the savings, they're almost gone. What about Tommy? Is he contributing?" Mom's face contorted in a mix of embarrassment and defensiveness. "He's looking for work. It's not his fault. These employers, they just don't understand him. The last place wanted him to start at 8 a.m. You know Tommy's not a morning person. And the one before that expected manual labor. With his intelligence." My jaw tightened. "Mom, at his age, with no experience, he can't be picky." "You don't understand," she interrupted, her voice rising to that familiar pitch that always preceded a Tommy defense. Then, abruptly, her tone shifted. "Lily, we need your help. We won't survive without it. I hate to ask, but you're doing so well. I knew what was coming." Part of me wanted to refuse, to remind her of all the times she'd chosen Tommy over me. But looking at her worn face, trembling hands, and desperate eyes, I couldn't. "How much do you need?" When she said $1,500 a month, I nearly choked. That was a significant portion of my salary, but I nodded. "Where's Tommy now?" I asked, already regretting my decision as I prepared to leave. "Oh, he's at a job interview," Mom brightened. "A very promising position with a tech company." Through the window, I saw Tommy's bedroom light on, the familiar flicker of his computer screen. Some things never change. True to my word, I set up an automatic $1,500 monthly transfer to Mom's account. Each time I saw that deduction, I told myself it was the right thing to do, even if it meant postponing my own plans for a larger apartment or a new car. I started visiting more often, though each visit felt like stepping into a time capsule. Tommy was always there, glued to his computer screen or sprawled on the couch with a beer. "How's the job search going?" I'd ask. He'd snap, "Mind your own business," or grunt and turn up the volume on his game. During the holidays, I couldn't bear the state of the living room. Peeling wallpaper, a water stain on the ceiling that would have driven Richard crazy. I used my Christmas bonus to hire contractors to repair it. When Mom sprained her ankle in February, I called to check on her. "Oh, it's not so bad," she said, though I heard the pain in her voice. "Is Tommy helping you?" "He's busy with some online interviews. I hired a home health aide. The money I'd been saving for a vacation covered her wages for 3 weeks. Then came the day I walked in and found a stranger sprawled across our sofa. She looked like she'd stepped out of a reality TV show. Fake nails, heavy makeup, and revealing clothes. She scrolled through her phone, surrounded by empty chip bags and soda cans. "Who are you?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Tommy emerged from his room. "This is Candy," he announced, "my fiancée. She lives here now." Candy didn't look up, just popped her gum loudly. I watched in disbelief as she reached into the grocery bag Candy helped herself to the gourmet cookies I'd brought for Mom. "Nice to meet you too," I muttered under my breath. Later, I called Mom to get her perspective. "Oh, Lily, she sounded more animated than I'd heard her in months. Isn't it wonderful? Tommy's finally settling down. Candy's been such a good influence. He hasn't been out drinking with those awful friends in weeks." That's because she's drinking all my imported beer at home, I thought, recalling the empty bottles in the recycling bin, but I remained silent. "And he's talking about getting a job," Mom continued excitedly. "Candy's cousin knows someone at a tech startup. Tommy says it could be his big break." I made noncommittal noises, thinking of the countless big breaks Tommy had mentioned over the years. Mom was so enraptured by her bubble of perpetual hope that I couldn't burst it. My next visit began like any other. I juggled grocery bags, pushing open the front door, only to freeze. The house looked like a tornado had ripped through it. Dirty dishes piled high in the sink, takeout containers littered every surface, clothes strewn across the floor. Candy lay sprawled on the couch, perfectly manicured nails tapping away at her phone screen. She didn't even look up as I put down the groceries. "You know," I said, my voice sharp, "you live here, rent-free, eating food I pay for. The least you could do is wash a dish or two." She looked up slowly, a smirk playing on her heavily glossed lips. "Who do you think you are? Giving orders? This isn't your house." "I grew up here," I retorted. "You're just a guest." She laughed, a harsh, triumphant sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, honey, you've got it all wrong. This house belongs to Tommy now. Your mom signed everything over to him. There's a will and everything." I found Mom in the kitchen, sorting coupons she never used. "Is it true?" My voice sounded strange. "Did you make a will leaving everything to Tommy?" She wouldn't meet my eyes at first, fiddling with the papers. Then something hardened in her expression. "Yes," she said flatly. "It's true." "I don't understand," I whispered. "I'm the one helping you. I'm the one sending money every month. Tommy doesn't work. He doesn't contribute anything. Don't you dare talk about your brother that way." Mom's voice rose sharply. "You don't understand him. You never have." "Understand what? That he's a parasite, perfectly content to live off my money while his girlfriend trashes our home?" "Oh, stop being so dramatic." Mom's face twisted into something unrecognizable. "You want to know the truth? I never loved you the way I love Tommy. He's better than you in every way that matters. And I don't want to see you here anymore." Those words hit like physical blows. For years, I told myself Mom loved me, just showed it differently, that beneath her obsession with Tommy, she cared. Now I knew better. I turned and walked out, Candy's triumphant laughter echoing behind me. 21 years of hoping, making excuses, trying to earn my mother's love. It all ended with the quiet click of a door closing. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the 4-hour trip, climbing the stairs to my apartment, or even sitting down on my couch. But I do remember the moment of clarity as I stared at my phone's banking app, at the automatic transfer to Mom's account. That was $500 every month for the past year. My finger hovered over the screen before I decisively clicked Cancel Recurring Payment. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in work, ignoring the hole in my budget that now felt like an opportunity, not a burden. I researched investment options for the money I'd been sending home. Maybe I could finally save for a house, a real house, not just an apartment. Exactly 1 month after my last visit, Mom called. The money didn't come through, she said, without preamble. There must be some mistake with the bank. There's no mistake, I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. I canceled the transfers. There was a moment of stunned silence before she exploded. You what? How dare you? After everything I've done for you. I actually laughed. Everything you've done for me? Like what? Forgetting my existence? Forcing me to be Tommy's maid? Telling me you never loved me? That's different. She used her familiar Tommy defense voice. You know I was upset, but you can't just stop helping us. We're counting on that money. Tommy and Candy are planning a vacation to Cancun. They need a vacation. Tommy needs a vacation from what? Exactly? Playing video games and drinking beer? I interrupted, my voice rising. Let me tell you something, Mom. Tommy doesn't need a vacation. He needs a job. How dare you speak about your brother that way? You're just jealous because... Because what? Because you left everything to him? Fine. You made your choice. Now he can take care of you. The rest of her tirade dissolved into a stream of accusations and demands. I hung up. I let her rant for a moment before interjecting, Goodbye, Mom. Don't call me again. I blocked her number before she could respond, but Mom wasn't finished. Over the next few weeks, messages flooded in from every conceivable platform. Facebook messages detailing her financial struggles, Instagram comments denouncing me as a terrible daughter, emails recounting her supposed sacrifices, most of which I couldn't recall. Tommy joined the barrage, sending aggressive texts about how I was destroying the family and that Mom was crying because of me. He demanded I resume the payments. I blocked him too, but not before replying, Here's a crazy idea. Try getting a job. Even Candy attempted contact, via LinkedIn of all places, with a lengthy message about my supposed cruelty and Tommy's delicate emotional state. I had to admire her creativity. 6 months have passed. I don't know how they're doing, and for the first time in my life, I feel no guilt. Perhaps they finally realized Tommy needs to support himself. Maybe they're still waiting for me to capitulate and resume the payments. Maybe they found a new target for their manipulations. The truth is, I don't need to know. What I do know is that the $1,500 I used to send them monthly is now going towards a down payment on my own house. I sleep better now, no longer jolted awake by angry messages or guilt trips. I know Richard would be proud of me for finally standing up for myself. The other day, I drove past a construction site with a now hiring sign. For a moment, I considered taking a picture to send to Tommy, but then I smiled and kept driving. Their problems aren't my problems anymore. Finally, after all these years, I'm free.